Hi class! For my final essay project, I analyzed the opening chapters of 5 novels that were in the young adult genre that all discussed some type of social issue or an important issue. The 5 novels that I picked were The Art of Starving by Sam Miller, Sold by Patricia McCormick, What Kind of Girl by Alyssa Schimmel, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, and Recovery Road by Nelson Blake. Each of these authors used a different type of technique to, one, open up their stories with an attention grabber so the audience can be engaged, and also develop the characters or the plot for the next chapters as the story would go on. So that would be the goal of the first chapter for most writers, and these authors use different techniques. So starting off with the first novel, which was Recovery Road by Nelson Blake. This novel was about a young girl named Madeline as she's being sent away to Spring Meadows, which is a rehab, to treat her drinking and her anger management. In this story, the author used descriptions to establish the plot and the setting, and by doing that, it leaves the reader wondering where the story is heading, and also establishes the environment of where the story is taking place. For the next novel that I picked was Sold by Patricia McCormick, and this is about a very young girl in India as she's being sold to sex slavery for the reason that her parents can't afford to live in their house. Like, they have a very poor financial situation. So this story is kind of similar to Recovery Road because the author also uses description, but unlike Blake, McCormick focused on one object, but it wasn't the physical appearance, it was more of like what the object means. So in this case, she focused on the tin roof that was in the family's house, and in the story that means that you weren't very wealthy and the tin roof would always keep falling. So by describing this tin roof and what it meant to the family for having that, it kind of developed the story a little bit, and it developed the setting because it kind of showed the environment that the family was living in. Also, there was a little bit of dialogue between the mother and the daughter, which showed character development and foreshadowing, because in the story, the girl wanted to go work for another family, and she would do anything to help her family be financially well off. So it does show a lot about the character, the girl, and also foreshadowed that she would do anything to help her family. In this case, it would be sex slavery. For the next book I read was The Catcher in the Rye, and in this story, it talks about a boy named Holden as he is expelled from school, and he is gonna go to therapy for PTSD. And so this author, he narrates the backstory of Holden's expulsion from school. So it's kind of like a backstory. So by using a backstory is told by the main character, which is Holden, it introduces the character and the story, but it doesn't give away too much. So that leaves the audience wondering about what would happen, and they want to continue reading about Holden and his situation. So while it still establishes the storyline and the character, it does do a really good job on creating that attention grabber. For the next book, which is What Kind of Girl, this is about a girl who is going through an abusive relationship, about her experience exiting the abusive relationship, and in the first chapter, the author uses inner monologue. So by using inner monologue, the reader is able to understand that the story will involve Maya, which is the main character, in dealing with her abusive relationship, but it still leaves the reader wondering how everything will unfold, because this is just Maya thinking in her mind about what people will think about her, what consequences will happen. So it does develop the story, it develops the character, develops the story of what it's going to be about, how it might unravel, but it doesn't really give that much away, so they can still continue reading about the storyline. And then the last novel I read was The Art of Starving. So The Art of Starving was about a boy who suffers from an eating disorder, and he also has a sister who ran away recently. So he wants to find out why she ran away and everything. So in the story, the boy, as he starves himself, he gets these like superpowers that he can tell something about people that he couldn't before. So in this instance, the author uses specific rhetoric that was very specific to eating disorders to indicate that this story might have something to do with eating issues. So in the story, on the first page, it said something like day 1, this many calories, which is very common in eating disorders, as people tend to count a lot of their food intake. So it doesn't really provide a lot of information about his eating disorder at first. It just kind of mentions brief things with the rhetoric, like the calorie counting and how he hasn't eaten all day and how it makes him feel better. And so the reader already knows that it's going to be about eating disorders. And then they also have a call to action, because they introduce the sister as running away, and that it kind of calls him to find out. That's kind of why the story is going to be happening. So it moves the story along, and while also developing Matt, the main character. All in all these authors did a really successful job in providing the 2 main points of what an opening of a story does, which is grab the reader's attention, and also develop the storyline a little bit, kind of tell you what the story is about. And they all use different techniques, or if the techniques were similar, they used them in a different way. So overall, it showed me that even though there are techniques and you could read about how to use this technique, authors or writers can have a different spin on how to use it, and there's not a one exact way to use a technique and still be successful. So that's what it taught me. If you guys have any questions, you could just comment them in the discussion board, and I'll answer them before the semester ends. Thank you.